Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello, listeners. This is your host, Constant Taylor, and welcome to the show, folks. Today, we have a very special guest on the show, and let me tell you, you guys are in for a treat. You're going to want to listen to this entire program because this person has some very powerful information to share with you. Our special guest today is Eric Kaufmann. Eric has been a professional speaker for over 10 years. Eric speaks primarily in the field of leadership excellence and effectiveness. And what does it take to move beyond your comfort zone? Eric has spoken primarily nationally, but has also spoken internationally as well, including Europe. Eric is based out of San Diego. He's written a few books, including a book called Leadership, A Hero's Journey. And he has another book coming out called The Four Virtues of a Leader, and also a book called Leading for Stillness. Eric, that's quite a bio you have there. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Constant. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Glad to have you. Now, I'd like to kick off the show by asking you to tell us a little bit about your speaking business and the type of groups that you speak to and the content that you cover with them.
Perhaps I'll start with the types of audiences. I speak to senior level managers and leaders in all kinds of different industries. So while I have had a lot of experience in life science industry or vertical and technology industries, I also speak to construction, hospitality, retail. What happens when you get to the senior level of organization is that the industry becomes less critical than the capacity and competency to be an effective leader. So it's speaking to CEO groups. I just spoke to a group of CEOs up in Portland, Oregon. I'm going off to Miami to speak at a conference for executive directors in the housing industry. I'm going to New York to speak to a group of leaders in advertising. I'm heading out to the Silicon Valley to speak to CEOs of technology companies. So a lot of my engagement is with CEOs, presidents, senior managers in organizations, and the focus is consistently the same. It's really about how do you, as a human being who's got the responsibility, the accountability, shouldering this responsibility for results, how do you navigate that gracefully, powerfully, and in a way that is meaningful, both in terms of bottom line results, but also in terms of human impact. I'm looking at what does it take to be a leader for whom people volunteer to follow. Because to me, that's the net of the issue. Leadership is something that we focus on a lot, but the real test of leadership is followership. Are people volunteering, choosing, electing, giving themselves to the leader to do the kind of work that's required to accomplish the kinds of results for which leaders are accountable.
Okay. That is really fascinating information, Eric. Now, digging deeper into the subject of leadership, development, excellence, and effectiveness, how do you go about taking either an individual or a group and maybe assessing where they are and then taking them from where they are to where they would like to be or where they can be?
Yeah, so the process actually begins sort of upside down for me from what you've described. So you said, how do you assess a group and then take them from where they are to where they want to be? It actually my process starts the other way. The first thing that I want to find out is not where they are, but where do they want to be.
Okay.
So the trick of leadership, as is the trick of developing leaders, is to first establish context. And the context is the reason for doing what we're doing. And the reason is something that emerges from being able to answer the question, why? Why are we here? Why are we putting forth energy? Why should we work so hard? Why should we work together? Why should I even care? And so any engagement, whether it's with an individual or a team, begins with being able to answer the question, why? Why are we here, and why does it matter? Then we can begin the work of saying, okay, well, if you've established the why, which is the vision, the purpose, the aspirational horizon towards which we are aiming our efforts, energy, then the question becomes, well, then what do you have and what don't you have in terms of skills, abilities, relationships, and resources to accomplish what you need to accomplish? And then once we've decided what do we have, then we go down to the level of saying, well, how are we going to get there? So the how is the final question, which is closing the gap between the aspirational vision, what are you accomplishing, the current reality of what do you have in terms of skills, ability, resources, and relationships, and then, what falls out is the areas of strength, which we want to leverage, and the areas of gap, which we want to close.
Okay, fascinating. So basically, you start, like the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you begin with the end in mind.
Yeah, I always begin with the end in mind because, quite frankly, if I started doing an assessment with an individual or with a team, the assessment has to be based on some preconceived notions, and I have lots of tools for assessing strategic thinking, assessing processes, assessing culture, assessing management effectiveness, leadership effectiveness. But the data that comes out of that assessment is really just information, right? If we want to use that wisely, if we want to use it in a meaningful way, then there has to be a context, and that context is designed, as it were, by the desired outcome, right? So, if I found out that you are really strong at accounting, let's say you're a senior leader, if I find out that you're really strong at accounting and financial analysis, but your aspiration is to be the CFO, which has more to do with people management and organizational influence, we don't really have to work on the accounting and financial part of it, right? Even though you're strong at it, that's not what I want to leverage. What I really want to look at is how are you doing relative to building trust? How are you doing relative to effective communication? So excuse me, the vision, the desired outcome is the guiding principle.
Okay, excellent. Now, another area that we talked about as you and I were chatting just before the interview was about fear. How do you help individuals manage fear, conquer it, overcome it?
Yeah, so that's just a great question. It's a question that is so central to every leader's effect. It's remarkable. And the first thing I'm going to say is that I don't know how to help somebody eliminate fear. Fearlessness is not an option. Fearlessness is not available to the human experience. We are built on a psychological foundation of fear. And so the question is not how to become fearless. The question is how to cultivate the sense of courage. And I was sitting with a client on Friday, and he was talking about expanding his business and some of the reasons he was holding back. And all the reasons he was holding back were not logical anymore because we worked through that. He was holding back out of anxiety, out of fear. And so what we had to do is we had to do 3 things. We had to face it, we had to name it, and then he had to embrace it. And so it's facing the fear is to say, what's really going on here, right? It's not just the concept of the logic. It's the what is really going on. And what was really going on for him was the fear that if it went south, his team would lose trust in him. And so we had to name it. So naming it is really fear of failure. So what was going on for him was fear of failure. And so once you face it and name it, then you can embrace it. You can begin to move towards it. We can make a plan around it. We can actually treat it as a relatable component rather than just some kind of a subconscious, quiet internal limitation. And so the idea of courage, my definition of courage is very simple. I define courage as walking towards what you'd rather run away from. Walking towards what you'd rather run away from. So when fear comes, when something threatens us, we want to run, boom, get out of the way. And I propose that courage is nothing more than walking towards what you'd rather run away from. But to walk towards it means we need to name it, we need to understand it, we need to embrace it. And that becomes the courageous contribution of a leader, not the fearless, but the courageous contribution.
Oh, that's pretty powerful. And just speaking to you, beforehand and now, you appear to be someone who practices what they preach. And I know that we had talked a little bit about meditation as a tool. It's a tool that I've used for a while, and I happen to discover that you use it as well. Is that something that you integrate into your bag of tools with your clients?
Absolutely. I integrate it in two ways. One is it continues to be a way that I am able to be attentive, present, aware, courageous in my own right when I get anxious about my own fear of failure or inadequacy or fear of being rejected, which all comes up in a consultative relationship. And I'm talking to somebody else, and I'm going to push them over the edge, or I'm going to help them go to the edge of their comfort zone, or I'm going to challenge their limited notions. I get anxious too. What if they don't like it? What if they reject me? So my own meditative practice helps me as a practitioner stay present and continue to provide value. And my clients have increasingly inquired and asked about their own meditation practices, and many CEOs and executives have begun in earnest to incorporate it into their lives, and they find several things that are consistent. One is that they are less reactive, which goes a long way when you work in a world that's constantly changing. Two is that they are better decision makers because they're able to calm some of the anxiousness and be more present to their experience. And three, perhaps most importantly, they find that their relationship with their employees improves almost in every case. They are more attentive. They listen better. They're able to address the right issues and build a greater sense of trust.
Okay, awesome. Now, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about your book, The Four Virtues of a Leader. Maybe if you could talk about what those virtues are and expand upon that a little bit.
Oh, now you're talking something that I'm hugely passionate about. So I cast about for years and years looking around to try and determine what is consistent about all the different leaders that I really admired. And I'm not just talking about, Gandhi or Lincoln or sort of folks out in history. I'm talking about the people that I interact with day in and day out. And it was tough because there's different styles, there's different approaches, there's different personalities. There, some are short, some are tall, some are thin, some are heavy, some are mellow, some are intense. It was just all over the place, and I couldn't quite satisfactorily identify, this or that characteristic. But what emerged was this consistent pattern of what I ended up calling virtues, right? And virtues are things that you sort of discipline yourself to cultivate. And so these four virtues I ended up labeling as focus, courage, grit, and faith. And what I found was that the leaders who were really effective, the people I really admired, were not necessarily answering or repeating a certain behavior by rote, but they were thinking about certain things over and over. So focus answers a question: what am I creating? They all know that they are creators. They're not victims of circumstance. They're not passive bystanders in the world. They are actively creating, and they're creating with their actions, with their thoughts, with relationships. They're always engaged in creating something. So they're focused on what they're wanting to be, what they want to do, and who they want to do it with. That's the focus virtue. Second virtue was this virtue that I call courage. We spoke to some degree, and the courage question is really answering what am I avoiding And that folks who are really successful, really effective as leaders, become aware when they're avoiding something because they know that they only avoid something out of anxiety and fear. And so when they can answer, what am I avoiding, they can begin to practice that sense of courage, because when they're avoiding something, the organization is avoiding it, relationships are being squandered, and opportunity passes by. So that's the second virtue. The third virtue is a virtue that I call grit, which is passion and perseverance towards long-term objectives. And it answers the question, what am I sustaining? You know just as well as I do that the significant accomplishments in our lives have taken longer, required more energy, and were more challenging than we thought they were going to be when we set out.
Absolutely.
And so this grit is the capacity to keep going. I think motivation is a wonderful idea, but it's kind of BS. You can get pumped up, you can get charged up, but leadership, effective leadership, really being a good executive, has nothing to do with motivation. It has to do with grit. It has to do with commitment. It has to do with going on and doing it when you don't feel like it, when you're burned out, when you're disheartened, when you're disappointed, when you're frustrated. That's great. And then the last one, excuse me, is this virtue I've come to call faith. And I don't mean a religious faith. I mean the leap of faith. And by that specifically, it answers the question, what am I letting go? One of the most powerful questions that a leader can ask themselves is, what is necessary for me to let go? In the U.S., we have this strong sense that we always have to add more, build more, expand. But there's something incredibly powerful about the ability to let go. Letting go of a relationship, letting go of a project, letting go of a resource. The most challenging thing to let go of is a belief or an idea or an outdated, no longer serving you principle or idea. So those are the four virtues.
Wow.
That people share.
That is very powerful information, and I say this with all sincerity, is that the information is really resonating with me to the point at which I've got hair standing up on my arm here. And speaking of letting go, this interview has gone by so quickly. It's like, wow, our time is up. So that's I really thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on the show and speak to us. And let me ask you, if the people would like to find out more information, how can they get in contact with you or get in contact with your group to find out more about what you do and what you can offer them?
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, by the way, Constantine. I really appreciate it. My website is Sagatica. Sagatica.com. That's Sagatica, Sagatica, from the Latin sagacitas, like sage or wisdom. So Sagatica.com. My email, which I'd welcome anyone to email me, is Eric, ERIC, at Sagatica.com. And that's the most accessible and easy way to get a hold of me and my team.
Okay, Eric, thank you so much for coming on the show. That was very fascinating information that you shared with our listeners.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.